Hey there, everybody. This is Kevin O'Connell with FYN Creative. And to my left here on Zoom and coming from Vermont is Susanna Penfield with the organization NACEDA that we had a chance to work with this past fall of 2020 to really help bring their summit to virtual life, kind of helps them with rebranding, build some momentum for their organization and their conference, and really help find a way to be inclusive to all their delegates. So this is a client success story, and we're going to spend the next 15 to 30 minutes kind of doing a director's cut of the video and the project and how it came to be. But Susanna, as I said earlier, thanks so much for pulling some time out of your schedule to do this. Could you just quickly, I'd love to hear how long you've been with NACEDA. What is your role? I'm sure you wear a lot of hats as working in a nonprofit, but what is NACEDA? What do you do? And how long have you been with NACEDA?
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. So NACEDA, I guess just to start broadly, as an organization is an alliance of 38 state and regional community development associations that are across 25 states and the District of Columbia. So we work primarily to advance community prosperity by building capacity for our members in those state and regional networks, also for advocating for public policies and resources. Convening those organizations is a huge part of our work, as well as partnering with other sectors of the economy, such as the arts or healthcare. So, but the convening piece is really central, and that's what I've worked on a lot. So I joined NACEDA in June of 2020 as an AmeriCorps Vista. So I am serving a year-long term to continue to help build NACEDA's organizational capacity in order to serve all of our networks. So a huge part of that has been to build out the summit, which is an annual event that brings together community development professionals from our network and outside.
And what normally pre-pandemic world would have been an in-person in some form of another event, right? And is that like a centrally located conference, or does it take place in all the different states, or what's I guess if you give us like a 30-second overview, what's a pre-pandemic version of this summit, and then what obviously the virtual version was?
Yeah, so pre-pandemic would have been in person. The location changes this year. It was supposed to be in Minneapolis, Minnesota. So that would have been in October 2020, which is when it took place virtually as well. But in the spring of 2020, when most of the world was readjusting expectations and plans, NACEDA also realized that it was unrealistic to think that by the fall we would be able to have an in-person event. And so quickly shifted to thinking about how to take the summit and all of the workshops and speakers and networking pieces that go into an event like that and put it virtual in a virtual world. So that was sort of the impetus. Started late spring, and in addition to the summit, we realized obviously that a lot of our members, the state and regional networks, were facing a very similar challenge, and they also have community development conferences that they had to put online. So that prompted conversations, and soon we ended up deciding to collaborate with 10 of our member associations and their respective statewide conferences to build this 10-day long collaborative event that we started, that is called Strengthening Resilient Communities. And so the summit was 3 days of that event, but it was part of this very prolonged experience that had keynote speakers throughout and different conferences interwoven.
Yeah. And before we kind of get into obviously a small facet of kicking off your conference, the video, and then how FYN Creative and our team came into play to work with you guys. But looking back, I mean, could you or your team or Frank pull out any positives of going virtual? Like, I mean, one, I'm sure you saved cost and travel and things like that, but was there more accessibility, more, did it allow you to get more creative? Did it allow more inclusivity from your members? Like, were there a couple of positives that you could think of from going virtual, other than us being stuck behind our Zoom cameras for days or hours on end? Or
yeah, I mean, I think you pointed to some of the top ones. The accessibility and the inclusiveness of an online event definitely was feedback that we got from all of our members, who were able to allow so much more of their staff to come, participating members of their own networks, people that otherwise would have had to pay travel fees and lodging fees and food now could, just pay the entrance fee and then sign on to their computer from their home. So that was actually pretty incredible. And we had really great attendance for that. We were also, able to bring in speakers from across the country. And, that cut the cost of not having to pay for those same things. So overall, and the experience of collaborating virtually actually went, I think, with slight hiccups, but much more smoothly than anyone could have anticipated. So I
always joke, you gotta, and even for our interview today, I was like, I gotta say a prayer for the technology gods and make sure everything works, right? Audio, visual, internet. So real quick before we jump into the actual video project, how many people, I guess, work full time for NACEDA? How many members? And I think I'm thinking back to the first 10 minutes so far. What does NACEDA stand for?
Yes, yeah.
The acronym.
So NACEDA stands for the National Alliance of Community Economic Development Associations. So we have 38 members, which I mentioned, across 25 states and the District of Columbia. There are 3 full-time staff. So Frank Woodruff is the executive director, and then we have Jeremy Brownlee, who's the membership director, and Suzanne Gunther is communications. And then an AmeriCorps. I'm the second AmeriCorps that they've had. And I think including those, so of those 38 members that are all state and regional networks, we end up touching 3,000 community. I have the numbers right here. I can look it up. But is that?
You can call it 3,000. That's great. Perfect. Okay, all right. So the actual project, and I'll never forget this because your executive director, Frank, I think it was like a Tuesday, Wednesday afternoon, maybe right after Labor Day weekend. And I was just about to go into the dentist office and Frank calls me and I'm like, I wonder what he wants. And he kind of shares what you just shared, like, hey, we're moving everything online. We have this poem, which I want you to explain, Theo Langston's role in the poem and how that came to be. But and I said, well, how long do we have? He's like, about a month. But we decided to do this. And obviously what I just heard you say, back in the spring, when the pandemic was hitting, you were starting to think and work to pull this virtually. When did, I guess, internally, before it got to me, when and how, and how did it come to light? Like, hey, we need a digital asset. We need something to be different, or I guess, what was the conversation internally? How did it come to be?
I think really it started actually from the poetry itself. So we had reached out when the summit was supposed to be based in Minneapolis, and we have a member in Minneapolis, the Metropolitan Consortium of Community Developers. And through their network, because NACEDA tries to be really intentional in bringing creativity and arts into these typically have been in-person events. And so had reached out to them, they connected us with a Minneapolis-based performing and multidisciplinary artist whose name is Theo Langston. And so Theo had sent Frank 6 poems, I believe, that NACEDA, we didn't really know what we were going to do with them yet. We know we wanted to incorporate them. We wanted, sense of place was really important. He's based in Minneapolis, where the summit was really grounded. And we really wanted to transition that sense of place to be within the virtual setting as well, even though everyone would be in their respective homes. So I think with that in mind, we were brainstorming different ways we could use these poems, and Theo himself read one during the summit. We sent a printout of one of the poems on a little bookmark to all of the summit attendees. And then I think that sort of in tandem with this idea of wanting to have a really dynamic, engaging opening to the forum itself, we realized that there's this one poem in particular that centers on the idea of marching that would really bring forward that idea of, being mobilized and standing in solidarity with each other. And if we could create something with all of our member organizations that encapsulated that in a video, then not only would we be able to open the summit, but we could share it, and we could use Theo's words And so have that sort of Minneapolis tie, while also representing everyone that was going to be part of the forum.
Yeah. See, this is great, Susanna. You and I are having a conversation a couple months after this, because one, I didn't know that you printed it out and sent it out. And I knew that a lot of what your organization did, but I didn't know that it also had a kind of a tie or adjacent tie to arts and things. So just, it's great to hear kind of a little bit, a deeper story to then a video. I think at least how we work with clients and just people doing video or any asset you see, and like it's supplemental, it's this or that, but like it has a lot more meaning than just a 3-minute and 18-second video. And the little funny thing, side thing is, I remember it might've been after our creative meeting, we were looking at all 6 poems. We didn't necessarily know it was 6 poems. So Ethan and I, our editor, were looking and we're like, cause I think you guys read it. We're like, oh, it took like a minute 33 or whatever to read. And I'm rereading. I'm like, wait, this took me 5 minutes. And I think it was like, I think I might've texted Frank. I'm like, which vignette are we using here? So.
Well, none of them have titles. So it was very hard to discern.
Yeah. So we're going to get into the creative process and then share the video here in about 5-6 minutes. But and I think we both would be remiss to not give the author a bit of a shout out, or you mentioned Theo, but you mentioned he's part of Minneapolis. And the other thing, that this was very kind of in the midst of the political climate, the climax of the social justice, Black Lives Matter movement, which is so much needed and talked about, and inclusivity. But could you talk about this poem and Theo and why you chose this March one?
So Theo, is a multidisciplinary artist. So does work, both written poetry and also does a lot of performance work. He is with the Red Eye Theater in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And so I think we chose this poem. So all of his work really spoke to this moment, and sort of a collective sense of pain that was coming, especially very poignant coming from Minneapolis. George Floyd's murder was, incited and catalyzed a lot of the protests and racial reckoning that happened this summer. And so to have him write in the aftermath of that, and to see this work, a lot of it was both about acknowledgement and recognition of that pain, but also how we can take that pain and transform it and use it to mobilize and inspire and empower people. And this poem in particular really showed that determination, I think, that we'll continue to move on, continue to move through this from across the country, from these different places.
Yeah. And it did that. I remember the 10 delegates all kind of brought their own flavor and spice and personality to it. And then just even, I know you guys were big on the positioning and movement of the logos and showing that coming together, which is what you as an organization, but we as a society and country needed and still need. So the creative process, I remember one of the great ways I knew that you guys were going to be a great client is all 4 of you, I was just talking to my intern. He kind of was asking me like the creative process working with clients. And I generally say there's 3 phases, there's 3 types of things that clients go through. Either one, they have a video idea or inspiration or creative thing that they know they want. Or 2, they have a campaign, they have a bit of a call to action and they know they want or need a video or digital asset, but they're in the ballpark, but not sure. Or there's a blank canvas. And I would say that, and not in a bad way, I think you guys were kind of in the blank canvas, right? You guys were like, hey, here's a poem, here's the conference, here's our messaging. We don't know what this is going to look like. Would you agree with that? Like, it was kind of like, what do we do? Right.
Yeah, completely.
But the way that you guys, I knew were going to be a good client is all your decision makers, Frank, your 2 other colleagues were on that call, and you came prepared to answer those questions. And I remember some of the key words you said is like, we want this to provide inspiration. We want the music and feel to be not necessarily celebratory, but this determined optimism feel, empowerment. And I think Frank kept saying like meeting the moment. And I think you might've just said that earlier too. But just, real quick before we share their video, what did you think from kind of initial reaction to creative process before we even shared a rough cut? What was that process like working with us? In your perspective?
It was great. I think I think we all really appreciated the way that you took the fact that we were very, very open and sort of provided this blank canvas, and pushed us to, if we didn't have maybe a concrete vision of what we wanted, think about what we wanted to express and what sentiments we wanted to come from this video, and brainstorming words like the ones that you just listed. I think we also provided you with songs that we thought
super helpful.
Yeah. So, and small other videos, there were some music videos we threw in, things like that actually really helped us to articulate how we wanted to kick off this conference more generally. And then that, was channeled through this video. So that was hugely due to your process that you presented to us.
That's great. That's great to hear. And I appreciate that. And, the analogy I use with my team and sometimes with clients is 80% of the work needs to be done before we bring out a camera, jump into an editing timeline, collect footage. And I also say the chef's terminology, mise en place, like everything has a place, cut everything up before you turn on the stove. And so that's why even though that creative meeting was 45 minutes, it provided so much information to Ethan and I, even though the animation and pulling it together was a pretty big task, especially in a short time. So if you're ready, let's share the video. Like I said to you, Susanna, if you want to stop anything or just share any commentary over, or we can just kind of debrief it after the 3-minute video and kind of close out the interview, we can do that. So I'll let you chime in, or I can stop something if I see something, or like I said, we can use the chat and bring this to life. So I'll share my screen and I'm going to play it from QuickTime because I'm not going to trust YouTube or Frame. I want to make sure that I have it on my computer and it doesn't freeze. So let's do this. Share screen, QuickTime, share sound. You hear sound?
I do, yes.
Cool.
There are some who march draped in the ephemera of it all.
Buoyed by camaraderie, overjoyed to be part of the zeitgeist.
We march with ghosts always.
We march from the moment we awake because we linger in bed too long. But ghosts, they claw and gnaw, unrelenting.
And so we march. Every
His
step
cadence was so good right here.
Knowledge of gravity.
And followed by Bernie.
There's some who march, chants mumbled.
Tongue-in-cheek, vision halved by a wink, armored in wordplay.
We march stripped bare, eyes bloodshot, we won't blink.
Chants for mercy, chants for respect, chants for humanity.
Chanting until our throats crack, our bodies break, our spirits wither.
She did such a good job with those lines.
Under the weight. It's hard to muster levity under so much weight.
There are some who march, eyes fixed on a far-off utopia, porcelain castle in the distance.
Little regard for their feet or ground beneath.
We march because peril marches.
Behind among
I love this throwback.
We march to keep from being swept up in the currents of apathy.
We march because
this was the part that gave me chills, that piece right there.
Yeah, and the change in the music too does an amazing job.
There are some who march with us, banging drums of wokeness.
Drowning out criticism with the sound and fury of blunt force triumph.
And it parallels that idea of sound and fury too, the elevated music.
Eyes bloodshot, unblinking, stepping as we do.
Soon their steps will know the weight of gravity.
Soon their steps will be indistinguishable from ours.
All marching
together.
Soon.
And our steps will shake off the choking dust of apathy.
And speed the tectonics of society.
Cultural mountains moving inch by inch.
Without our march.
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 The world doesn't move.
I mean, the poem itself is just so well written, but I think what brings it to life is that one part that I said, the Suzanne Parks chilling part, changing momentum, and then just that without our march sequence just tightens it up, I felt like.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I mean, I love the decision to repeat the Without Our March at the end, which, you know, was not part of the original poem, but works so well for bringing all those voices together and showing how everyone is respectively marching, but it becomes this collective march, which I think is the overall sentiment that we wanted to express.
Before I stop sharing the screen and we kind of recap and break down the edit, I know one thing that we worked with you and your team on is you want to make sure that, and we could even talk about this too, is like, you obviously picked your delegates. There was 10 different states represented. But I know you guys really want to make sure that these 10 individuals got showcased. And so there was this piece, and then the kind of the animation of the logos coming together here at the end. Why was this an important outro for your organization, for us to create for you guys?
Yeah, I think we just felt strongly that each organization be given the visibility, and these logos in particular are the logos that they used for the conferences that were part of Strengthening Resilient Communities. And so these were, you know, the individual pieces, the individual marches, maybe, if you will, that were separate in some senses, and they're coming from their different corners of the country. But ultimately, we wanted to show how they're converging, which the animation does a really good job of. And I think, one of the things that we talked with you about was making sure that it was very visible that these organizations were coming together, even if in a symbolic way.
Yeah. And I think in our creative meeting, it was like, oh, maybe we could do a map, we could do this, but just somehow turning the logos into the resilient master logo was something. I'm glad we kind of came to I think Ethan and I were kind of like, how do we visually do this, then how we actually technically do it. And then I think, because correct me if I'm wrong, like, you guys really haven't done much video prior to this, right? Because I think we brought a lot, like all the greens, the blues, the wording, the fonts. And I know we went back and forth. I think we had one version with different fonts, but all this branding was new to you guys, right?
Completely. Yeah. This was an entirely new process. Yeah.
So Susanna, kind of high level, what do you think rewatching the video? What do you think of, obviously, the 10 delegates doing this? Or I kind of have one or two other follow-up questions, but rewatching, what are your thoughts? What do you think of the way it flowed and the delegates and how they spoke on camera?
Yeah, I mean, I've watched it so many times now, and it's chilling to me every time. And the process of choosing the speakers, we just, asked each of the participating organizations to select someone from their own network. So they could have worked in the organization or been part of one of the community development groups that is in their network. And they did a great job, I think, finding people who would bring passion and life to those words, which you all did a great job, finding those voices that really elevated particular points and lines. And it's amazing to watch the video, I think, and how it builds that momentum. And it feels like a march, and it feels like a movement because of what I said during it, of the way the music sort of crescendos and rises towards the end, and people are getting, more fiery. And there's the line about sound and fury, and the music is very loud at that point too. So I think it flowed really well, and it creates, it feels empowering to watch.
Yeah. The, kind of on, I'm going to give him credit. Ethan did all that animation and really kind of laid the track. And I think from my point of view, working between you and Frank and your desires and what you guys wanted, and then the technical side, it's almost kind of like a conductor. And so when we started to collect the assets, the B-roll, the imagery, and then add the actual recordings, that's where kind of the fun began, because it's like, well, could we put Bernie here, or could we put Susanna here? And I remember, like, we had a master document here. I'm not going to bring it up, but we had a couple different documents going of, like, what I did is I categorized who I thought was the best, kind of the most energetic to maybe the least energetic. And then we tried to pick apart, like, who we thought could really set up different parts of it. And then the other good thing that we did was you said that the music, like, I think we had 10 or 15 tracks we were playing with. We then cut that down to 5, 3. I think not last minute, but fairly somewhere along the end of the first rough cut, we had a different track. And And so it's just, that's kind of the process of like picking the right track. And then, like you said, crescendoing it, spacing out even because people read those poems at different cadences and energy levels. So we almost had to create our own space between some of those sound bites to create that momentum. So what was, so I'm trying to think, what was the kind of, how did this video launch? It's now January of 2021. How have you used it over the last couple of months? How it was received? Like, what was your use and purpose of the video?
Yeah. So initially it was like we said, the first thing that played for the opening day of the entire forum. So the event that encapsulated all 10 conferences. So that was the first instance. And then we played it again on the last day of the forum because we actually had members and participants requesting that we play that video. So we played it in the closing ceremony, which was also when we presented NACEDA's award for leadership in community development. It's called the Diane Sterner Award, and that was presented to Bernie Mazik, who is one of the speakers in the poem. So that was, I think, a really powerful moment. And we've since published it on our website. We played it during our annual member meeting as sort of a way to propose another collaboration in the coming year, similar to what we just did, and show, use that video because it so well embodies that feeling of coming together in solidarity and inspired hopefully members to want to join that maybe didn't participate in the last one. So we've definitely gotten a lot of mileage out of it, and I'm sure we'll continue to.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, we work on a variety of different projects, but I remember saying like up front, like this could be an evergreen piece, or we could create a 1.1 or 1.2 version. And it's great to hear that it's being used. I didn't know it was used at the annual member meeting, so that's great to hear. And I think from my side as a digital storyteller and producer, it's like the positive with COVID or being virtual is like, there's no way you would have probably had the budget and or we would have had the time to fly around to all these 10 states. Like that would be great, right? If the budget was 4 or 5, 6 times of what you guys could afford. But at the same time, I think the one thing I made a point of is getting anybody on camera, whether it's me in person directing them or picking up an iPhone or Zoom recording, it could be a bit nerve wracking. So it was, I remember coaching you guys the right language and picking out the right people. And then I know I've created a couple of slide decks, but sending you guys a slide, I think I made a NACEDA video for you, for those people, right, to watch, kind of like a customized video. Hey, before you press record, here are like 5 things to think about to make you look and sound good. So I think that was a benefit. Like it pushed everybody's comfort zone, but like, again, we didn't have to fly around to 10 different dates. And we still, what I say, we turned lemons into lemonade. Sure, it wasn't 4K quality footage, the audio we had to correct, but at the end of the day, I think it's a pretty high level branded, professionally edited asset for you guys that, like you said, get a lot of mileage out of. So
absolutely. We're very happy with it.
Awesome. Susanna, any other wrap-ups, other thoughts that you or your team had, or other questions you had of us and how we worked, or anything else you would want to share about the kind of the project and the engagement together?
I guess just the other thing I was thinking about during the video was, the B-roll, and I think how well that was integrated. And you made that mention of that callback to sort of, I don't even know what decade that was, but people marching.
So like a 1940s, 1950s.
Yeah, right. So a while ago. And I really appreciated, I think that it showed that this is a movement, especially because we were speaking to a sector, the community economic development sector, that has been doing this work for decades, through generations. And it's not like this is new. There's maybe a revitalized sense of urgency or need, but it goes back. And I think the video showed that really well, that it is a collective momentum that is not just across the country, but across years. So
yeah, awesome.
Awesome.
Well, Susanna, do you have anything else you want to share? Because I want to kind of provide an outro or closer here, but anything else any thoughts or creative things or questions you had?
No, I think, you covered it.
Cool. Well, Susanna, thanks so much for taking some time out here. I know it was pretty busy towards the end of the year for you all. And seriously, you guys are in the top echelon of clients and new clients we had a chance to work with. And with the 10 states and the work that you all do, if someone watches this interview, take away the benefit of the kind of the director's cut behind the scenes of this, but if someone is enthusiastic or feels like they want to be part of your organization, can they do that? Or where can they find out more information about NACEDA or potentially volunteering or getting part of your organization or coalitions? I guess, do you offer those opportunities? And two, where can they find out more to be a part or support your organization?
Definitely, yeah. You can go to naceda.org and everything that you could want will be on that site.
And you guys do volunteer opportunities,
yes,
or
so
across those 10 states, there's a way to get involved?
Yeah, so across any of our states, if there is a community development network that is interested in joining NACEDA, there is an option to do that. You can speak to our membership director. All of our contact information is on that site under who we are, and you can donate. So any of those are welcome options.
That's always a good call to action for any nonprofit. Funding and community support always helps you guys probably do a lot with a little. So
yes.
Awesome. Well, Susanna, send my best to the rest of your team and Frank. And again, it was a great, 5-6 weeks working with you guys. And it was definitely one of the top couple projects we did last year. And amidst the pandemic, like I said, we got pretty creative and it was a pleasure working with you guys. So thank you. And thank you for doing this recap.
Yeah, of course. No, thank you. I mean, this video was huge. And like we said, a total first for us. So you really guided us through it and ended up with such an amazing product. So thank you.
Great. Well, stay warm in Vermont, and I'm sure we'll talk soon here. But take care, Susanna. Thanks a lot.
Have a good afternoon.
You too. Bye-bye.